I had always thought I knew what I was getting into when it came to work. After all, a job is just a job, right? You clock in, do your work, and then clock out. The end. But that all changed the day I saw the ad in the newspaper. I'd been bouncing between odd jobs for years, waitressing, bartending, anything that paid the bills, when I saw the strange, almost cryptic job listing. Wait staff needed. Apply within. Strange hours. Strange company. I thought it was a joke at first, maybe some gimmick for Halloween or an artistic project. But then I saw the address. It was an old diner, one that I recognized from when I first moved into town. The place had been around for decades, and I remembered seeing it in passing, but I'd never actually been inside. I'd heard the rumors, strange stories about the diner's patrons, about the late hours it kept, but I'd never thought too much about it. Curiosity won out, and I decided to apply. When I walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and I was greeted by the faint scent of coffee and something else, something almost metallic but not unpleasant. The interior of the diner looked like something out of a 1950s time capsule. Retro booths, a long counter, and a faded neon sign that buzzed faintly in the window. The entire place felt frozen in time, as if it hadn't changed in decades. There was a warmth to it, but an underlying chill, like something wasn't quite right. I approached the counter, and the man behind it looked up from a newspaper. He had dark, hollow eyes, but his smile was wide, almost too wide. "You must be the new hire," he said. "I'm Sam." I nodded, offering a hesitant smile in return. "Yeah, I saw your ad." He pushed a menu toward me, and I sat down, already feeling the weight of the place pressing down on me. Sam didn't speak for a while, just watching me as I fidgeted, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. "You don't know what you're getting into, do you?" Sam finally asked, his voice low. He seemed to take his time with each word, as if he were testing me. I shook my head, unsure what to say. "I just need a job, really." Sam nodded, then pointed to a small chalkboard on the wall behind the counter. It had a list of rules written on it in block letters. Rules. Always serve exactly at midnight. Do not speak to the customers unless they speak to you first. Never, under any circumstances, clean the booths after midnight. Never ask the customers where they're from. If a customer asks for the special, you must serve it. No questions asked. Leave before 3 a.m. or stay forever. My eyes flicked back to Sam, confused, wondering if this was some kind of initiation. But he didn't look like he was joking. "You've heard the stories, right?" Sam continued, not waiting for my response. "The ones about the diner? It's not like any other place." I nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond. "They're not just stories. This place isn't like the rest of the world. We don't ask questions, we don't get involved, and we definitely don't break the rules," Sam said, his voice growing colder with every word. "The people who come in here, well, they aren't like you and me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked before I could stop myself. Sam gave me a long, hard look, as if deciding whether or not to tell me more. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and serious. "They're dead, kid. This diner, it's for them. They come here at night. They eat, they drink, they talk, they just wait." I stared at him, blinking, unsure if he was being serious or just playing some kind of weird game. But Sam's face remained serious, and something about the way he said it, "they're dead," made my stomach twist. The silence in the diner stretched on, and I glanced around. The place was empty. There wasn't a soul in sight, just the soft hum of the neon sign and the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere in the back. I turned back to Sam, who was still watching me closely. "So, you want the job or not?" he asked, his voice a little more clipped now. I hesitated. What had I just gotten myself into? The idea of working at a diner for dead people? I didn't know if I was ready for something like that, but the longer I sat there, the more I realized that I had no choice. I needed this job, and something deep inside me told me that this wasn't just an ordinary diner. "I'll take it," I said finally, my voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at my insides. Sam nodded, his eyes glimmering in the dim light. "Good. Be here at midnight for your first shift. And don't forget the rules. They're there for a reason." My first shift began at midnight, just as Sam had instructed. I arrived early, my stomach in knots, wondering what exactly I had gotten myself into. As I stepped through the door, the familiar jingle of the bell above the diner greeted me, and I found myself standing in the same quiet, still place that I had sat in earlier. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the passage of time in a way that felt almost deliberate. Everything was eerily silent, except for the hum of the neon sign and the occasional scrape of the diner's door opening or closing. Sam wasn't there when I walked in, but the chalkboard with the rules was still in the same place. I glanced at them again, my stomach tightening at the thought of what I was about to do. This wasn't like any other diner. As Sam had said, these were not normal customers. A bell chimed from the kitchen as if on cue, and the door to the back swung open. Sam emerged with a tray of coffee cups, each one steaming and heavy with the scent of strong, bitter coffee. He didn't say anything as he placed the cups on the counter in front of me. His face was unreadable as usual, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Without a word, he nodded toward the empty booths. "They'll be here soon," Sam said simply, and then returned to the back without a glance back. I stood there for a moment, my eyes scanning the empty diner. It felt wrong being there. I had the distinct sensation that the place wasn't empty at all, that somehow I wasn't alone. The weight of the silence seemed to press in, wrapping itself around me. Then the door swung open. The first of the patrons walked in. He was tall, with long, flowing dark hair and a suit that looked like it had been cut from another time. The man didn't look odd in any particular way, aside from the fact that he was completely silent, his movements unnaturally smooth. His eyes, though, they were strange. They were dull, unfocused, like someone who wasn't quite living, or not living the way I understood it. "Good evening," I said, my voice a little shaky. "How can I help you?" The man didn't answer at first. Instead, he just stared at me. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, the hairs on my arms rising. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low and raspy. "Coffee," he said. I nodded and quickly poured him a cup, trying to ignore the strange feeling crawling under my skin. The man took the cup, still staring at me as if he could see through me. I moved to turn away, but then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something strange. His hands were shaking as he lifted the cup, as though they were made of fragile glass. The movements were deliberate, stiff, like someone too aware of their own body. I forced my attention away, trying to calm my racing pulse. More patrons started coming in after that, each one strange in their own way. One woman, pale as snow, sat at a corner booth. She had a long, white dress and a veil that obscured most of her face, but her hands were the most unsettling part. She was gripping the menu, but her fingers were like skeletal bones, thin and brittle. Another customer, an older man, shuffled in with a cane, his face weathered and full of age, but there was a hollowness to his eyes that made it hard to look at him. He sat down without a word, his gaze never leaving me. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to focus, to do my job, just as Sam had shown me. I poured coffee, served the food that arrived from the back, and wiped down the counter. I didn't say anything more than I had to, not wanting to break any of the strange rules Sam had given me. But something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. These customers, they didn't move the way normal people did. They didn't interact with me the way I expected. It was as if they were in a world of their own, in a place between here and there. A bell rang, and the door opened again. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Another customer stepping in at the witching hour, but this one was different. He was young, barely in his 20s, with short, neatly combed hair and a bright smile, but his eyes were dead, empty like the others. He looked just like any regular guy you might meet at a diner, but there was something about him that felt off, something that didn't belong. I watched as he took a seat at the counter. His fingers tapped the surface rhythmically, as if he had all the time in the world. But it was more than that. The tapping was almost mechanical, like a pattern that had been ingrained into him, like something he had done for an eternity. "Coffee?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He didn't speak, just nodded, and when I brought it to him, I saw it. His reflection in the shiny counter wasn't his. The figure in the reflection was someone else. Someone with hollow, empty eyes staring back at me. I pulled back in shock, spilling the coffee, my heart racing. The man didn't react. He didn't even blink. He simply continued tapping his fingers on the counter. That's when the first bell tolled. The bell, my bell, the one that had been silent since I arrived, rang once, and then again, and again. I glanced toward the back of the diner, where Sam usually stood, but he wasn't there. The sound of the bell grew louder, more frantic, ringing through my head like a pounding drum. The other patrons, those dead eyes, those lifeless faces, were staring now, all of them. They weren't eating, they weren't talking. They were all staring at me. "Time's up," one of the women whispered from across the room, her voice barely audible but cutting through the silence like a knife. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't breathe. I had broken a rule. I had spoken to them. And now the bell was tolling. Was it time? The bell's tolling grew louder and more insistent, reverberating through the walls, through my chest, until it seemed to fill the entire diner. The patrons, the dead, as I had begun to believe they were, stayed silent, their cold eyes locked onto me. I was trembling, unsure of what I had done wrong, but I knew deep down that I had broken one of the rules. I could feel the weight of it pressing against me, suffocating me. The woman in the corner booth, the one with the skeletal hands, didn't say a word. She just stared at me, her eyes fixed on mine, a faint smile curling at the corners of her lips. It was a smile that seemed to say she knew something I didn't. The older man with the cane didn't move either. He was still, unnaturally still, watching me with an intensity that felt like a knife being twisted in my gut. The young man who had just entered, his eyes were empty, like he was waiting for something to happen. And then the bell tolled once more. Midnight. The sound of it shook me to my core. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I could feel the atmosphere of the diner shifting. The once ordinary space had transformed into something else. The air had become thick and charged with an energy I couldn't understand, like it was alive, breathing. The patrons seemed to grow even more still, if that was even possible, their eyes never leaving me. I stepped back from the counter, away from the young man, my breath shallow. I couldn't think clearly. I needed answers. I had to know what was going on. I had to know why this place felt like it was alive, why the bell tolled, why the dead sat in the booths and ordered coffee, and why it all felt so wrong. But no answers came, only silence. Then, from the back of the diner, I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate steps. Sam was walking toward me, his expression unreadable as usual, but there was something in his eyes now, something different. He wasn't looking at me the way he had earlier, like he was simply explaining the job. This time, he looked like he was waiting for me to make a choice, to accept the truth of what this diner really was. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I knew it wasn't. Nothing was okay. Sam didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the counter and placed a freshly brewed cup of coffee in front of the young man. The man's eyes didn't shift, his hands still tapping, almost mechanically, on the counter. Sam gave me a long look before turning to face me fully. "You've been here for a while now," he said, his voice deep and quiet. But there was an edge to it, like he was about to tell me something important. "You've seen the rules, you've followed them, but there's something you haven't learned yet." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean? I followed all the rules, right?" Sam nodded, but his eyes were hard. "You're getting too comfortable," he said quietly, looking over at the patrons. "You can't be too comfortable here. These people, they don't come here for food, they don't come here for coffee. They come for something else." I blinked, trying to understand. "Then, what do they come for?" Sam didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face the patrons, all of them sitting in perfect silence, like statues. They weren't eating, they weren't talking, but they were all staring at me. It was like they were waiting for me to understand something I hadn't yet figured out. "The dead," Sam continued, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "They don't leave. This diner, it's a place for them, and for us." He looked directly at me, his gaze piercing. "Once you start serving them, you're no longer just a waitress. You're part of the cycle." I felt the blood drain from my face. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a physical thing, and I felt my pulse quicken. "Cycle?" I repeated. "What are you talking about? I'm just here for a job. I need the money. That's it." Sam shook his head slowly, his eyes softening. "It's not just about the job. It's about what this place is. The dead. They come here to wait, and the ones who serve them. They become part of the waiting too." I felt the room spinning, and I gripped the counter to steady myself. My heart was racing, and I could feel sweat beginning to bead on my forehead. This was too much to take in. What did Sam mean? What did he mean by the cycle? And what was going to happen to me now that I had broken the rules? Just then, the door to the diner opened, and a gust of wind swept through the room, sending a shiver through my bones. Another patron stepped in. This one, a woman in a long black dress, her face pale and gaunt, like a corpse freshly unearthed. She walked in slowly, deliberately, her eyes scanning the diner, but when they landed on me, her expression changed. Her eyes narrowed and she smiled, an empty, knowing smile. "She's one of us now." Her voice was cold, smooth, but something in the way she said it made my blood run cold. I stepped back instinctively, my heart thumping in my chest. This woman, this thing, she knew something I didn't. She had to. Sam didn't react. He just nodded at her as though she were a regular customer. "Sit down, Delilah. Same as usual." Delilah didn't answer right away. She walked over to an empty booth and slid into it, her gaze never leaving me. I tried to breathe normally, but my chest felt tight, as though I were suffocating under the weight of this place. "You've broken the rule," she said, her voice like a hiss now. "And now, you belong to the diner. There's no going back." I felt the weight of Delilah's words pressing against me, suffocating me. I stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. "You belong to the diner." Her smile had turned cruel, her pale eyes gleaming with something darker, something older. I tried to calm myself, but the truth of her words was starting to sink in. The other patrons, the ones who had been sitting quietly in their booths, didn't seem bothered by her presence. They didn't react at all. It was as if they were simply waiting for the next moment, for the next step in the cycle to begin. The quiet that filled the diner seemed even heavier now, oppressive. I glanced at Sam, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but his expression hadn't changed. He was simply watching, waiting, as though this was all part of the routine. He didn't say anything more, just continued to pour coffee and serve the dead as if nothing unusual was happening. But the fact that he was so calm only made me feel worse. This wasn't just a strange job, it was something far worse, and I had crossed a line I couldn't see. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling slightly. I felt trapped in this place, unable to escape. It was as if the diner itself had a hold on me, its walls pressing in, drawing me deeper into its twisted existence. Delilah's eyes never left me as she sipped from the cup of coffee I had poured for her. Her fingers, long and skeletal, wrapped around the mug with an unnatural grace. I tried to look away, to focus on something else, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic about her gaze, something that kept me rooted in place. "You're here now," Delilah said, her voice smooth and cold, like the sound of a distant whisper. "The rules are the only things that keep this place in balance. Once you've broken them, you can't go back. You're part of the diner now, just like the rest of us." I felt my throat tighten, panic rising in my chest. "I didn't mean to break the rules," I said, my voice trembling. I didn't know any of this." Delilah laughed, a cold, hollow sound that seemed to echo in the room. "No one ever does. That's the point. But now you'll learn. You'll learn what it means to serve the dead." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't want to learn. I didn't want any part of this twisted reality. But no matter how much I wanted to leave, I knew it was impossible. I had crossed the line, and now I was trapped in this place. The diner had claimed me, and there was no way out. The clock on the wall ticked, its sound strangely loud in the stillness of the diner. I glanced at it, trying to distract myself from the growing sense of dread. 3 a.m. It was the dead of night, the time when everything in the diner shifted. I had no idea what would happen when the clock struck, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Delilah finished her coffee, placing the cup down gently, her eyes still fixed on me. "You'll start to understand soon enough," she said. "The dead don't just come here for food or drink. They come here for something else. And if you're going to serve them, you'd better learn what they're really after." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know what they were after, but the question slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. What? What are they after? Delilah leaned in, her smile widening, as though she were enjoying my fear. "The dead come here to remember. They come here to relive their last moments. and they come here for what they can't get in the world beyond. My stomach turned. I had no idea what she meant, but the implication was chilling. The dead were stuck here, trapped in some kind of eternal cycle, and I was just a part of it now. The bell above the door chimed again, and another figure walked in. A woman this time, pale and dressed in a long, flowing black gown. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and she seemed to glide into the diner with an otherworldly presence. As she moved toward the counter, the air grew colder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something far beyond my control. I quickly moved behind the counter, trying to focus on my duties, on the routine I'd been given. I poured coffee, served pie, and tried not to look at the customers too long, but it was impossible to ignore the way they looked at me. Their eyes followed me as I moved about the diner, their gaze penetrating, judging, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for me to understand what they wanted. I glanced at the chalkboard with the rules. My mind kept going back to them, to the strange set of guidelines that had been drilled into my head. The rules had been simple, almost absurd, but now I understood. They weren't just there to keep the diner running smoothly. They were the only thing that kept the dead from becoming something far worse, and breaking those rules had consequences. The bell tolled again, marking the end of another minute in this strange, twisted world. The woman who had entered the diner sat at the counter, her eyes fixed on me, waiting for something. I didn't know what, but I had no choice but to serve her. The dead didn't ask for much, just their coffee, their pie, and the quiet satisfaction of being acknowledged. But the longer I served them, the more I understood that the cost of doing so was high, and there would be a price to pay. The bell tolled once more, loud and echoing as the woman at the counter took her seat. I couldn't stop looking at her. There was something haunting about her gaze, the way she stared into me like she knew exactly what I was thinking. I had broken the rules. I had broken the first one, and now I was paying the price. The customers in the diner were eerily still, sitting in silence, sipping their coffee, chewing their food. But I could feel the weight of their presence, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me. The place felt alive, but not in the usual sense. It was a living, breathing thing in the way that a trap is alive when it waits for its prey. The air felt heavy, thick with an energy I didn't understand, and I knew that no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. The woman at the counter finally spoke, her voice soft and melodic, but it had an edge to it that made my blood run cold. "You're new, aren't you?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes." "You've been told the rules," she said, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "But you've already broken one, haven't you?" I couldn't help but glance at the chalkboard that hung on the wall. The rules were there, plain as day, written in chalk, and I couldn't ignore the fact that the first one was the most important. Never speak to the dead unless they speak to you first. And I had spoken to her. I had broken the rule just by acknowledging her presence. But what did that mean? What consequences would I face? Was I already too far gone? I didn't answer her question. Instead, I turned away, focusing on the task at hand. The coffee pot in my hands shook slightly as I poured, and I tried to steady it, my mind racing. She didn't say anything more, but I could feel her eyes on me, her presence inescapable, like an invisible weight on my shoulders. The other patrons in the diner remained silent, unblinking, their eyes fixed on their plates or the coffee cups in front of them. I glanced at each of them, one by one, their faces pale and lifeless, their movements unnaturally slow. They weren't like living people. They didn't eat like living people. They barely moved at all. I wiped down the counter, trying to distract myself, but I could feel it, the slow, creeping dread. The bell had tolled, marking midnight, and something was stirring, deep in the bowels of the diner. The air felt colder, and the walls seemed to close in, thickening with each passing second. A man sat down at the counter beside the woman. His clothes were old-fashioned, his eyes vacant, but his movements were swift, almost too swift. His gaze flicked to me, and for the first time I saw something behind those eyes, a glimmer of awareness. He wasn't like the others. He was different. But in what way, I couldn't tell. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The silence in the diner grew heavier. It was as if time had stopped altogether, each second stretching out, and I could feel the dead watching me, waiting for something. I didn't know what, but I felt it, a sense that the clock was ticking down, that I was on borrowed time. The woman beside me reached out, placing her hand on the counter. I saw her fingers, long, thin, almost translucent. Her nails were sharp, curved like claws, and she didn't need to speak for me to understand. She was waiting for me to acknowledge her again. I swallowed, trying to ignore her, but I couldn't. The weight of her gaze was too much. I had to do something. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not sure who I was apologizing to, but I knew deep down that it was too late. I had already broken the rule, and now I had to face whatever consequence that came with it. I tried to move away, to continue cleaning the counter, to focus on something other than the oppressive weight of their eyes. But then another customer arrived. I turned, and the bell above the door jingled, signaling his entrance. He was a man dressed in black, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't make a sound as he walked in, but somehow I knew he was different. His footsteps didn't make a sound as he crossed the diner, and his eyes were black, voids that seemed to pull the light from the room. He slid into the booth at the back of the diner and ordered nothing, just sitting there, watching me. I could feel his gaze like a pressure against my skin, like he was waiting for something, waiting for me to do something. "Why are you here?" I asked before I could stop myself. The moment I spoke, I realized my mistake. I had broken the second rule, and this time the consequences would be worse. My voice shook as I glanced nervously at the others, their cold, lifeless eyes now fixed on me. The man in the booth didn't respond, but he didn't need to. The air in the diner shifted, and I felt the temperature drop. I could hear the faint rustling of movement in the corners of the room, and then, without warning, I felt the darkness begin to close in. The woman beside me stood up, and the other patrons did the same, their movements slow and deliberate. I backed away, my pulse racing, but I couldn't move fast enough. One of them reached out a hand, grabbing my wrist with a grip that was icy cold and unyielding. "You can't leave." The voice was soft, but I could feel the weight of it. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement, and it was the truth. The diner wasn't just a place to eat, it wasn't just a place for the dead to pass through. It was their place, and now it was mine. I felt the chill of the dead wash over me as their hands reached out, grasping for me with cold fingers that seemed to pierce through my skin, freezing me in place. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I tried to pull away, but the grip was unyielding. I could feel the weight of their touch, the sharpness of their nails, their fingers that felt as though they had been crafted from the coldest, most ancient stone. For the first time since I had entered the diner, I truly understood what Sam meant by the rules. This wasn't just a diner. It wasn't just a job. The dead came here not for food, not for drink, but for something much darker, something far more sinister than I had imagined. And now, I was part of it. I was bound to this place, bound to the dead who lingered here night after night, waiting for their orders, waiting for their silence to be acknowledged. I looked desperately toward the door, but it was as if the diner itself had closed in around me. The bell above the door, which had been silent since the beginning of my shift, began to toll again. The sound was deep and slow, vibrating through my very bones, shaking me to the core. Each toll reverberated in my skull like a haunting, rhythmic chant, beckoning me to listen, to obey. The figures around me began to move more, shifting in their seats with the smoothness of predatory creatures, their eyes unblinking, unyielding. They were watching me, waiting. The man in black, the one who had come in late, was now standing. His presence felt like the final push into a chasm from which there was no return. He approached me slowly, his dark eyes fixed on mine. His gaze was piercing, cold, and it seemed to burn through me, making my skin crawl. "You've made a mistake," he said softly, his voice low but undeniably commanding. "But it's too late now. You're one of us, whether you like it or not." I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. My feet were rooted to the floor, and I could feel the air in the diner growing heavier with every passing second. The walls seemed to close in on me, the dim lights flickering above as though the very building was breathing, reacting to the shift in the air. The dead in the diner began to murmur, a low hum of voices filling the space. It was unsettling, as if they were communicating without words. I tried to make sense of it, tried to understand why I'd been drawn into this nightmare. Why was I here? Why had I broken the rules? I looked over at Sam, hoping for some sort of explanation, some kind of intervention, but he remained silent, standing behind the counter, watching the scene unfold. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were filled with something darker now, something ancient, as if he knew this moment would come. "You belong to the diner now," Sam said finally, his voice deep and cold. "You were chosen the moment you walked in, and now that you've broken the rules, there's no turning back." I felt a knot in my stomach, a horrible, sinking feeling that I couldn't escape, no matter how much I wanted to. The diner wasn't just a place of food and drink, it was a place of waiting, waiting for the dead to gather and relive their final moments. And I was trapped here, a part of that ritual now. There was no leaving, no escape. The bell tolled again, louder. The figure in black stepped closer to me, his hand reaching out. I tried to back away, but my body refused to move. It was as if something invisible was holding me in place, forcing me to face what was coming. His cold fingers touched my forehead, sending a jolt through my body. "Now, you will stay," he whispered. And with that, everything changed. The lights in the diner flickered once more, and then, as if on cue, the dead began to rise. Not all at once, but one by one, they stood from their booths, their hands outstretched. I could see them now, truly see them, what they were. Their flesh was pale, their features contorted in ways that defied logic, their eyes black as coal. But there was something familiar about them. They had been here before. They had always been here, sitting in their quiet corners, waiting. They weren't just dead. They were trapped, like me. Trapped by the diner, by the rules, by the bell, and now I was part of them. The walls of the diner seemed to distort. the ground shifting beneath me as the air grew thick with a heavy fog. The dead didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence, their cold, lifeless gaze spoke volumes, and I knew with a sickening certainty that I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Now," the figure in black said, his voice smooth as he stepped back, "you will serve the dead. You will take your place with the others." The bell tolled once more, its sound vibrating through my very soul. I could feel the weight of it, the pressure building around me until I thought I might break. The patrons, no, the dead, were waiting for their orders, and I was their server now. The last rule was the most important, the final one that sealed my fate. Serve them, no questions asked. And with that, I began to serve. The dead didn't ask for much, just coffee, pie, and the quiet understanding that this place was their sanctuary. But as I moved around the counter, serving them, I felt something shift inside me. The longer I stayed, the more I became like them. The more I belonged here. And as I poured the coffee, I knew I had become part of the diner's cycle. The bell tolled again, and I served.